Welcome, fellow enthusiasts of the unexplained, to Sasquatch Watch Radio. If you're as fascinated by the elusive, legendary creature known as Bigfoot, you've found your new home here on Sasquatch Watch Radio. We're diving deep into everything Bigfoot. From thrilling eyewitness accounts and compelling scientific theories to the latest research, expeditions, and even a little bit of the folklore that surrounds this enigmatic being, we'll explore it all. Whether you're a seasoned squatcher or just curious about the giant hairy dude in the woods, you're in the right place. Get ready to have your perceptions challenged, your curiosity piqued, and maybe, just maybe, you'll start looking at the shadows in the forest a little differently. So settle in, turn up your speakers, and let's journey together into the heart of the Sasquatch mystery. This is Sasquatch Watch Radio, and the hunt for truth begins now. Here is your host, Gary Kendrick.
Hey everybody, want to welcome everybody to Sasquatch Watch Radio. Today is August the 4th, 2025. We're going to have an exciting show. Tonight we're going to have Mr. Zach Bales from Kentucky. And without further ado, we'll bring Mr. Bales on.
Hello, good evening.
How you doing?
Doing real well. It's great to be here this Monday night. It's I think we met just a few months back, and I've been excited to be a part of the show ever since.
I'm really glad you come on. Give you a little information on Zach. Zach is a English teacher. Is that correct?
That is correct. High school English
teacher, an author, an explorer, a paranormal road tripper. I hope I said that right.
That is true.
Two of the books that you've got out right now that focus specifically on Sasquatch would be the Bigfooter's Atlas and Atlas of the Unexplained Bigfoot.
Well, I will say this: the Bigfooter's Atlas is I'm slowly. They're kind of one and the same. The Atlas of the Unexplained Bigfoot it's brand new. It's a reworked version of the other book. With a lot more graphics, a lot more details, kind of a revised and expanded. So I'm kind of fading away from the Bigfooter's Atlas, and the new iteration will be the Atlas of the Unexplained Bigfoot.
Excellent. I know you have visited right at about 48 states in the United States. I think with the exclusion of maybe Wisconsin and Hawaii.
North Dakota is actually, I got 49 knocked out, and North Dakota is the last one.
You've been to several countries in Europe, the Middle East, and I think you've even been to Latin America.
Yes.
With all those countries that you visited and things like that, do you see a common thread of the native people with sightings of like the wild man from Europe or the Mapinguari from down South America?
You know, all throughout the time that I've spent traveling around, I've met a lot of people along the way, and I tell you what, it's something that fascinates me about meeting new people is, you know, oftentimes when they hear what we do, me and my wife, and we call ourselves paranormal road trippers because we do like to go out and investigate all sorts of unusual phenomena, not just Bigfoot, but all sorts of other things as well. But when people hear that we're paranormal road trippers, that we're interested in these kind of wild, what many people would consider to be wild topics, it seems like that at first people are kind of skeptical about it. Some of the loudest skeptics, though, in the room, the people who say, oh, you all are full of it, there's no way these kinds of things exist. Those are also the people that when everybody else is kind of faded out of the room, they'll pull you close and say, are you serious about this? Because I've got something I'd like to tell you. And then they've got the wildest stories of them all. It's the loudest skeptics. But to answer your question, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. When people hear us talk about this thing, these topics, all the paranormal topics, no matter where we go, it seems like these kinds of stories about big, hairy, ape-like creatures, they transcend every culture on every continent. They transcend every state in the United States. Doesn't matter what part of the country, or some states are considered to be, I think, more than others, are very urbanized, but doesn't matter how urban. Believe it or not, there have been Bigfoot sightings in downtown San Francisco, California. A couple of Golden Gate Park has some Bigfoot sightings. So doesn't matter what part of the country, how urbanized or rural, these sightings transcend. They're everywhere. They're everywhere.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. I mean, like you was talking, I know here in Virginia, our former host, Billy Willard, he had an experience right beside of the Richmond, Virginia airport.
Okay.
So, yeah. So, I mean, it doesn't really matter, like you said, that they're there. They're everywhere you look.
Yeah, absolutely. I know, in the museum, we run a museum in Kentucky about kind of Bigfoot and other interesting paranormal topics, but oftentimes I'll have guests come through and I hear something from some of them, especially guests from like the West Coast. It seems like, they'll sometimes say things like, I didn't know there was Bigfoot sightings in Kentucky or Virginia or Tennessee. Oftentimes there's this feeling, I guess, that people get that Bigfoot is sort of confined to the Pacific Northwest and Northern California, Washington, Oregon, British Columbia, Canada, those big, wide open, old growth forests. But yeah, Bigfoot sightings, he's been seen in pretty much every state around the United States, and pretty much, I'd say he or she have been seen in pretty much every state around the United States, and really almost every country around the globe. In fact, many of the very earliest documented sightings of this creature, this phenomena, took place, in the hills and hollers of Kentucky, in the hills and hollers of Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia. So no, it doesn't irk me per se, but I can't help but shake my head when I hear people say that Bigfoot's just a West Coast thing, because it's definitely not the case.
I know until I had my initial sightings I'd always kind of believed in Sasquatch, but I was in that group. I always thought it was a Pacific Northwest, West Coast thing. And when that thing walked across the road in front of me, my whole world changed. It absolutely just total wrecked my entire thought process. But yeah, it's definitely everywhere. With that being said, too, in the hills and hollers of Kentucky and here in Virginia where I live at, and, places like that, they all have different names. Somebody's not going to come out and tell you that, hey, I saw a Bigfoot. They might tell you that they saw a no-neck or a wood booger, or in your case, it would be the Green River Monster. Can you tell us about your encounter with the Green River Monster?
In Kentucky, there are several names for a Bigfoot. I think Monster Quest, they famously referred to it as the Hillbilly Beast, I believe, on one of their programs. But where I'm from, in South Central Kentucky, the creature's gone by the name of the Green River Monster for decades. Green River is a very large river, one of Kentucky's most prominent rivers. Runs all across the state. Has its source in Lincoln County, travels through Adair County. That was where I encountered this particular legend. And then it finally spills into the Ohio River in Spotsville. As a matter of fact, there's a Kentucky investigator by the name of Barton Nunnally. I don't know if you've heard of Barton before, but he's written a couple books about this phenomenon, but he refers to this creature as the Spotsville Monster. He lives in Spotsville. It's all the same creature. All the same creature, because Spotsville is on the Green River too. I mean, most of the Kentucky Bigfoot sightings, a lot of them, I won't say most, but a lot of them have taken place along Green River. Well, I encountered this thing. I guess I should start at the beginning. The year was 2009. So a very long time ago. I guess you want to call it that. Yeah, maybe not in the grand scheme of things, but quite a few years back. And I was just getting started in the what I call the interest in the unusual, the unexplained, and the otherworldly. I'd always had an interest in these things, but I didn't start investigating these things maybe as fully or as in depth as I probably should have until 2005, 2006. That's when I first started writing. When I first got into this field of research, I was more, and by field of research, I'm talking about all things weird. I was more into the ghost stories and this sort of thing. Kentucky's got a lot of haunted history, a lot of folklore in regard to that type of phenomena. Well, more times than not, as I was getting into that stuff, the ghost stories, I would have people come out of the woodwork and they would say, since you're into ghosts, what do you think about Bigfoot? It's interesting that would always be brought up to me. And before long, people were coming out of the woodwork and saying, I've had sightings of Bigfoot or other Kentucky cryptids. And they were telling me where these sightings took place and asking me, you should maybe start investigating these kinds of things as well. Well, in 2009, in November, this had been actually started in late October. I had a very good friend, a guy by the name of Richard. I won't mention his last name because I don't know if he wants to be tied down with the story. But my friend Richard gave me a call and he said, Zach, you're not going to believe this. He said, that's how he started. He said, you're not going to believe this. He said, last weekend I was camping. I had taken my wife and my two kids camping out near the Green River in Adair County, Kentucky. And I said, okay, why would I not believe that? And he said, no, I've not gotten to the good part yet. He said, we were camping along the river. Of course, it was late October. It was a little chilly. He said, we pitched a tent there right on the bank of the river, and we put a bonfire together. He said, we brought marshmallows, hot dogs, the whole 9 yards. He said, we were ready for a great night of camping. He said, as the sun set there on Green River that night, the family was settled in. His kids were excited. He was excited. They hadn't had a chance to go camping in a very long time together. And, the night started pretty normal, he said. It wasn't until, it got dark out, a few hours after dark, that he said we started hearing something unusual. And I said, well, what do you mean? What are you talking about? And he said, well, it was on the other bank, on the other side of Green River. Now, in Adair County, this is the source right there at the very beginning. It's very narrow. Green River is at that point. We had actually been going through a drought in Kentucky at the time, and right there at the part of the Green River where he was camping that night, water couldn't have been more than 2-3 feet deep. Which is kind of unusual. Normally, Green River is a lot more mighty than that, but that particular night, just a couple feet deep. He said we were sitting in our campsite and we started hearing this crashing through the woods on the other side of the river. And he said I just tried to ignore it. I figured it was a deer or something. But he said the kids were a little jumpy that night. His wife was a little jumpy that night, and they were saying, "What is that? What is that?" And he decided he was going to sort of stem off the fear, and so he grabbed his flashlight and he said, I clicked it on and I shone it across the river onto the other bank. He said I didn't expect to see anything. He said, at the least maybe a deer standing over there watching us. He said you'll be surprised probably to learn that when that flashlight turned on and shined across the creek, he said I saw something that I've never seen before, and I've got no way of really explaining. And I said, well, try. And he said, Zach, it was Bigfoot. I said, what? He said, yeah, he said, it was a big, hairy, ape-like thing. It was standing 20 yards away from us on the other bank, staring across the creek at our bonfire campsite. He said our campsite was probably glowing pretty well. It had a good look at us. We barely had a good look at it. He said my wife screamed. My kids screamed. That must have startled this creature because it turned and then strode up the bank and disappeared into the woods. Well, Richard, my friend, saw this, and he said he tried to keep his cool. He didn't want to startle his wife and kids any more than they already were startled. But He said they were pretty shaken up. Like they were like, we got to get out of here. We've got to go right now. I don't want to be here one more minute is what they were saying. And he said, and Zach, I'm not going to lie, it ruined our camp. It ruined our whole night. He said, we've been waiting for this for months or weeks. And then all of a sudden they're trying to get me to throw the cooler and throw the tent. And we got to get this thing broken down. We got to get out of here. He said, Zach, it ruined my camping trip. I just thought you'd want to know that a friend of yours, about an hour from your home, saw Bigfoot just this past weekend. And, listening to him tell me this on the phone, I was kind of like, that's interesting. I'd never seen Bigfoot. I wasn't even sure that I believed in the legend really at this point. It was just something that, you hear people talk about, you see documentaries online about this sort of thing. But part of me, I'm one of those people. I just have to know for myself. Hearing somebody tell me that they've seen Bigfoot or hearing these eyewitness testimonies, it's hard for that to be real in my head. I got to know for myself. So I couldn't help myself. I asked Richard on the phone that night, I said, now, where were you when this happened? And he said, well, I was over by the Green River. He told me that there was a duck preserve a couple miles from town, a couple miles really from the nearest light source, like kind of far out in the sticks, really. And I said, how hard is it to get there? And he basically told me that night exactly where he was camped. And I said, Richard, you're going to be upset if I go over there myself. He said, oh, I wouldn't do that. He said, I wouldn't do it. And he cautioned me. And I said, well, again, I got to know for myself. Well, I got off the phone with him and I immediately got on the phone with my girlfriend at the time. She's my wife now. But I called her up and I said, you're not going to believe what just happened. I told her the story and she was, wow, that's really cool, she said. And I said, well, what are you doing this weekend? She said, what do you mean? And I said, well, Richard told me exactly where this happened. And there was silence on the phone. I think she was trying to process what I was implying that I wanted to do that weekend. And finally she said, you can't be serious. And I said, yeah, let's go. We got to go out there this weekend. She said, I don't know about this. I don't know about this. I said, it'll be great. It'll be fun. We'll have a good time. And hesitantly, I finally got her to agree to go over here. And so the very next Saturday, so this was 1 week after my friend Richard had this sighting on the banks of Green River in Adair County, Kentucky, that my wife and I were packed up our own tent, our own cooler, our own hot dogs and marshmallows and the whole 9 years. And we took off, gave me the exact coordinates to where he had his tent pitched. And by golly, that very next Saturday night, we pitched our tent on the same spot. Got out of the car, put the tent up, built the same campfire, probably the same spot that he had his on. And we were excited to see what we could see. Now, again, I'd gotten my start as a ghost hunter. So I knew all the ins and outs of ghost hunting. I knew about EMFs and EVPs and all these things. I didn't know much about Bigfoot hunting. I just didn't have any experience with it back in 2009. I'd watched the shows on like TV, though. You'd seen these things. And I knew just enough to be dangerous. I'll put it like that. I knew just enough to kind of just make a fool of myself. I mean, I knew that tree knocking was a thing. I knew that people would whoop in the wood, all these things. I knew that sometimes investigators would bring like canned food item, like baby food, really smelly baby food, and they'd put it out to try to lure these creatures. I didn't know what I was doing, but I brought a stick for tree knocking. I brought all sorts of pungent baby food and the whole 9 yards. And so very first thing I did that night, whenever we pitched our tent and set it up and the sun was setting, I uncorked all these baby foods. I sat them all around their campsite. This is the nastiest stuff I could find, just stuff that, I smell and just makes me sick to my stomach. I put them all around and I put my big tree knocker down and I was ready for a night of Bigfoot hunting. And well, the night began, and I started probably 8 or 9 o'clock. That's when we started whooping and hollering into the woods. And I was I don't know what I was expecting. I guess I was expecting to hear something. You whoop. I was expecting to get a response, and nothing happened. And then I went to the tree knocking. I did some tree knocking. Nothing happened. I did some more whooping. Nothing happened. Minutes start to pass, hours start to pass. I'm doing this every 20 or 30 minutes, just kind of listening really carefully for any footsteps on the other. I don't know. I guess I didn't realize that it was the Bigfoot hunting is often akin to fishing. I guess that,
Yeah, it is. You spend a lot of time sitting and doing nothing.
Yeah, I guess I was expecting, because again, I was there, amateur as they get. I guess I was expecting to just have a wild, exciting night. But things were going really slowly, and we'd done this for hours. We'd cooked our hot dogs. We'd told some spooky stories around the campfire. By about, midnight, with no results, nothing at all to show for our travel for an hour and all this mess, I'm not gonna lie, I was starting to get a little dejected. I was starting to think, we made a mistake. We shouldn't have come here. If there was something here, it's long since gone. It probably was traveling through. It's in Spotsville by now, or it's in Mammoth Cave, or one of the other places that there are some of these sightings. And that night, when we turned in and we went to bed shortly thereafter, right around midnight probably, we climbed into our blue nylon tent, and we crawled into our sleeping bags. And I'm not gonna lie, I was downtrodden. I was just defeated. I thought, well, what a disaster this whole event was. Well, I went to sleep. About 3 hours later, I woke up. Now, here's the thing about my sleeping habits. I don't ever wake up in the night. It's like one of my character flaws is when I fall asleep, I sleep like the dead. I've slept through fire alarms before at hotels. I've slept through fire alarms at our home before. I don't know what it is. My wife thinks I'm crazy. My parents growing up thought, what in the world? Why is he not waking up? Nothing wakes me up. Well, about 3 a.m. that night, I woke up. I startled out of my sleep. I wasn't really thinking clearly because, something must have woken me up. But I'm sitting there and my mind starts to finally process that. Wait a minute, why are you up? Did something wake you? And that's when the goosebumps kind of start rolling in, and my hair started to stand up it's kind of like that. Like, why am I woken up? And suddenly I'm covered in sweat, sitting in this sleeping bag. By that point, our fire had died outside the tent. It's, for all intents and purposes, it's pretty much pitch black, really all around. I can kind of make out the interior of the tent, but outside of the tent, it's a dark void. And my heart starts to pound. Like, why am I woken up? And I got this funny feeling, and I realized I better check on my girlfriend, because she was in the sleeping bag right beside me, but I had my back to her. I was laying on my side, and I realized I better roll over and make sure nothing's wrong with her. Maybe that's what's going on. Maybe my body's trying to tell me something subconsciously. So I start to just really carefully roll over. I don't roll over really quickly because I don't want to, the jostling of the sleeping bag. I don't want to accidentally wake her up too. So I kind of carefully start to roll over. And as I completely get around facing her, I'm shocked to see that she is awake too. Not only that, but she is sitting bolt upright in her sleeping bag, staring down at me. So again, my eyes are starting to focus here. I'm seeing a little more inside the tent, and I look at her face, and I'm telling you what, it's a face I'll never forget for the rest of my life. Her face was one of just horror, sitting there, pale face. Her face was just twisted into a look of fear and terror, and I don't know what all. Well, that's a shocking thing to wake up to, and
Yeah.
I start to say something, because you want to know what the heck's going on. Well, I start to say that. I start to say, what's wrong? I don't get that full phrase out though. I probably get the what of what's wrong. I get the what. And as soon as I start to speak, her index finger darts up to her lips like this, as if and she silently says, shh. She doesn't make that noise, but she just mouths like, shh, like, be quiet to me. And so I immediately stop speaking. I get the whoa, and then I get cut off with the, and again, I can't process what's going on. What woke me up? Why was she already awake? Why is she pale? Why does she look like she's terrified? And why is she telling me to be quiet? And that's when I hear it. I hear something. It sounds like kind of like what my friend Richard had described. Sounds like it's across the other side of Green River. So outside of our tent, outside of our campsite, across the river, sounds like it's in the woods on the other side. It sounds like a crash and a crash. And I realized that something is moving around over there. Now, we hadn't had a lot of rainfall since Richard had been there. The conditions of the creek were exactly the same. The drought, about 2 feet deep. We were probably about, again, 20, 30 yards from the other side of Green River. I'm hearing this crash, crash, crash. Sounds like something's coming down the bank. Sounds like whatever it is big. Sounds like it's pulling whole trees out of the ground as this thing is crashing down this hill. Well, suddenly the crashes stop and I hear crunch, crunch, crunch. And I realize that it's out of the woods and it's on the bank on the other side of this river. And then I hear splash, splash. And I realize it's in the water. Not only that, but splash, splash. These splashes continue. And I realize these sounds are getting louder because whatever this is, it's getting closer. Not only that, but it was as it was in the water, hearing these splash, 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 that I realized that whatever this was, it sounded like it was on 2 feet. Finally, after a few minutes of, now I'm pretty terrified myself. I don't think my wife was the only one who was pale with a look of terror on her face anymore. Now I hear crunch, crunch, and I realize that it has fully crossed the river and it's on the bank with our campsite. And then I hear more crunches, crunch, crunch, and now I realize it's in our campsite. And that's when I hear another sound that I'm never going to forget. This sound was a I realized it was smelling something. And my mind was like, what in the world? It smells like it was smelling. And I realized, oh no, those damn canned food items that I put all around the tent. I guess they'd work because it was smelling that awful baby food. And then I realized I kicked myself. I thought, oh my gosh, why didn't I put that baby food like down the river or up the river? Why did I made like a circle of this stuff all around our tent? I baited this thing in, and I'd like set the feast of this creature. And I guess we were like the dessert right there in the middle of the plate, waiting for it to chow down all the baby food. And it's at that moment I realized, man, you really screwed up. And looking at the look on my girlfriend at the time, my wife's now, look at her face, I realized, oh man, I should have probably put a little more research into this before we went right into the lion's den here. But then I hear more crunches and more sniffs, I realize it's going from canned food item to canned food item all around that tent smelling. And I realized that really the only thing separating us from whatever this was, what sounded like crawling around on 2 legs, was the nylon tent. We were like a thin layer of blue nylon from whatever this was. And I realized, man, I've really screwed. And I remember, okay, I do have a gun. I did bring a Glock with us that night, and I start to kind of reach for this thing, and because it was at the foot. Again, I was so unprepared. I just wasn't thinking straight, I guess, and it's down just out of reach. I'm trying to reach for this thing. And my girlfriend at the time's looking at me and she's saying, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't make any noises at all. You can see it on her face. She's like shaking her head back and forth. Like, don't move. Cause I'm, sliding across the seat, making that kind of material noise. And she's, don't do it. I'm thinking, I better do it. And then I hear the last couple crunches and I realize that creature, whatever it is literally right outside of our tent. And I can hear it breathing down. Sounds like it's big and breathing down on our tent. And just when I'm just about to that daggum gun, that's when it released this noise. It was a roar. It was the kind of noise I've never heard it before that moment, and I've never heard it since. It was the kind of noise, it just roared down on our tent and down on our campsite. And I'm telling you, it was the kind of roar that would keep you up at night. It was the kind of roar that you never forget for the rest of your life. It's the kind of roar, really, I'm sure they could hear it for like miles away. Like it was that like powering on us. And I froze and waited for it to, whatever it was going to do, but it turned, whatever it was. and it started to crunch and crunch away. And I sat completely frozen, and my wife was staring right at me, and she was completely frozen. We just stared at each other, and we waited, and slowly we heard that 2-footed thing stomp into the woods outside. It ended up crossing a gravel road. We heard it kind of stomping through a cornfield that was nearby, and we waited until not only could we not hear any of those stomps anymore, until they were gone for like 15 minutes before either of us finally had the courage to move at all. I'm not gonna lie, we were both scared. I just like Richard, my friend, a week earlier, we were determined to just get out of Dodge, and we packed our bags. It may have been 3 or 4, probably 4 in the morning. By the time this whole thing was over, we were packing up, and it's still to this day, it gets me. I didn't look for footprints. I wasn't interested in those things. Again, I was an amateur. I didn't know what I was doing. And we threw everything in our vehicle, and we just got the heck out of there. I've looked for years, 16 years now. I've been trying to figure out what that noise was, what that roar was. It's a roar that still sticks with me to this day. I've looked up every animal known to man, trying to figure out, bears, and there was a boar pop. But again, if it's a boar, it sounded like it was down. I've done every kind of homework imaginable to try to figure out what this noise was, and I just can't find it, no matter how much I've tried. And that really shook me up. And 16 years later, I've never had an experience quite like that since. But I still kick myself for the mistakes I made that night. But I wouldn't take it back, because it was kind of an eye-opening experience, kind of like what you were talking about a short while ago, about seeing something in front of you there. It was one of those moments that make me realize that, the world it's a bigger place maybe than a lot of us would be willing to would like to think, maybe, or some people would like to think, perhaps.
Oh yeah, that's an incredible encounter. That's really close too.
It was, I've had people ask me before. They said, "Well, if you had to do it again, would you unzip it? Try to get out of the sleeping, to get out of the tent to see what in the world it was?" I don't know. Honestly, probably not. I was the biggest coward that ever was, but I don't know if today. I don't know if I would have. It was one of the most terrifying things that's ever happened to me. And,
I understand completely. I've had something similar like that happen in a place that we did some research at. And I heard the footsteps outside of my tent, and I was actually reaching for the zipper on the window to unzip the window to look out. And I was thinking to myself, there's nothing but that little piece of nylon and some screen netting outside of that. And if you zip that thing down and it's looking through there and grabs you, dude, nobody's going to know what happened to you. Yeah. So I just kind of laid back down.
Yeah.
Well, Zach, it's about the halfway point of the show. And initially when I contacted you, I asked you a strange question about what kind of music that you liked.
Yes.
So we've created a song for you, and I'm going to play that song right now.
Okay.
Oh, come on now.
Through the mist and the pine I wander alone. Zach Bales searching for the beast unknown. Footsteps echo deep and slow. What lies ahead only shadows know. Bigfoot's breath on the mountain air. Do you hide or do you dare? Mystical trails, they twist and win. Searching the secrets Kentucky left behind. Rusty jars of things unexplained. Tales in bottles, memories stained. Lights that flicker in the holler deep. nights without sleep. The truth ain't far, the truth ain't near. It's somewhere between the faith and fear. Bigfoot's breath on the mountain air. Do you hide or do you dare? Mystical trails, they twist and wend, searching the secrets Kentucky left behind. Lantern flickers, shadows dance. A howl cuts through, breaks the trance. Mountains whisper, voices hum, calling me, telling me to come.
I like it.
That was nice. That was a good one. I don't know if the Paranormal Road Trippers Nightmare Galaxy or Gallery has a song, but now I'm pretty sure they do.
Yeah, I like it. I need to
That was a good one.
Get a recording of that one.
I'll try to get it sent over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it.
I'll send it over to you. I'll have to, after the show's over with, I'll get your email and stuff, and I'll try to get it to you.
Absolutely.
Well, Zach, I'm going to come into another question right here. I'm pretty sure you just told us this, but what really got you interested into Sasquatch? Was it your encounter with the Green River Monster?
Well, I tell you, I mean, I was always interested in my parents were public school teachers like me. I teach high school English. Well, they were both middle school teachers. So when I was growing up, they had books everywhere. They were all about, filling the house with books. And they invested in this series called Childcraft, which most of those books were just boring math and science. But there was one in there called Mysteries and Fantasies. And that was the one I was drawn to as like 4 or 5 year old. You open it up and every single page was a different mystery of Earth. And whether it be the lost city of Atlantis or UFO phenomena or any of that things. Well, one page was entirely, I'll never forget it, was the Patterson-Gimlin film, was the that famous shot. I'm sure you know the one I'm talking. Anyone who's into Sasquatch knows that. Is it frame 352, I believe, or 354?
Yeah.
Depending on I think which frame count you go by, but it's that shot, frozen on that page, and it said on that page something like, this is a creature believed to be Bigfoot, and a lot of the things in that book, a lot of the like Lost City of Atlantis, it was just art that told about it. A lot of the UFO were the alien encounters and things. It was all artistic renditions. But that one was a photo. It was an actual to me, that at the time it was tangible evidence. How was this a mystery? I thought growing up, because that's something, it's something real, something tangible. That really, more than anything else, got me into not just Bigfoot, but all of this phenomena. That book, but more importantly, that photo, the Patterson-Gimlin, that image, that frame 352 from the Patterson-Gimlin film, that launched my interest in Bigfoot, but later into ghosts and all these kinds of things, was that photo, because it was an actual physical piece of evidence. And to me, in my young mind at the time, I couldn't get that out of my head. So I think a lot of Bigfoot investigators owe the Patterson-Gimlin film for an interest. I think that really shot this field of research to, back in the 1960s to a zenith of popularity. But so I would cite that. So indirectly, the Patterson-Gimlin film was probably what got me interested in into the Bigfoot phenomena.
Excellent. That was a big influence on me because, I'm a child of the 70s and the 80s. And, I grew up with In Search of with Leonard Nimoy and all those other shows, and it was always a Patterson-Gimlin film, or it was always the Sierra Sounds. And I was just fascinated with it. My dad still thinks I'm crazy.
And it's never been debunked. We go to a lot of festivals and a lot of conferences and things, selling foot casts and T-shirts and things. It's kind of how it's one of our hobbies, or one of our side hustles, I guess you might say, is going to these events. But I also speak at a lot of these events as well. And I tell you what, all the time I have people come up to me and there's an inconsistency out there. Some people are wrongly under the impression that the film has been debunked. I get a lot of people, they come up and they say, well, didn't he admit? I was under the impression he admitted that it was all fake. And I always have to tell people, now, wait a minute. No. No one ever. There was never any of this. Mm-hmm. Patterson died, not too many years after the film, and went to his grave saying it was real. And the other guy who was there that day, he's way up in his 90s, 94, 95, and he's never once intimated that it was anything but legitimate. And of course, other people have tried to come out and say, well, I was the guy who created this suit. I was the guy in the suit. But I mean, you or I guess, could claim that we were in the suit, couldn't we? And I don't know if that would, anybody can say that. So yeah, I always try to tell people at these events, that's absolutely not true. There's a misconception, I feel like, that's been popularized for some reason or another, that the video has been debunked or that it came out that it was all a hoax. And that is absolutely not true.
No, it's been like, was it October the 20th, 1967, I believe. And to this day, no one has actually proven that it's a hoax. And they've actually never proven it's real. So it's just an enigma, it's just out there. And, I have my own beliefs in it. I believe it's real. I had an encounter myself, so I believe it's real. But yeah, a lot of people ask me, oh, well, didn't they come out and say that was fake? No.
Would you say, so you had a visual, a sighting of the creature?
Yes, sir.
Would you say that the what you saw, did it resemble in any way the creature in Patterson's film?
Kind of yes and no. It had the bulk. It was massive. I mean, absolutely massive.
Yeah.
But the face looked more human on the one that I saw. It actually, when I say more human, it actually kind of looked more Native American.
Okay.
It had that distinctive look, the prominent brow ridge or the prominent cheekbones. And
yes.
Although the nose was really flat, it did have like a native nose, but it was just really wide and really flat. Varix has a question here, and I'll put it up. How did Zach's encounter affect his now wife afterwards? Do they still camp?
I can honestly say we never go camping anymore. I think that may have been the one and done type of situation for that. Well, I take that back. We have been back to that site. We went back at least a couple more times camping there. Never have had any similar occurrences again at that particular site. But if you're interested in visiting this site, that's one of the many maps that I have put in my new, when I first published that book, the Bigfooters Atlas. I don't know what I for some reason, I guess I didn't anticipate that people would be interested in seeing maps to that location. I was under the impression that, because my goal was to create maps to many of the iconic Bigfoot sites, like the Patterson-Gimlin film site, some of the original Skunk Ape sightings, the Honey Island Swamp Monster, some of those interesting big squatchy, you might say, sites all over the United States. I never anticipated that people would actually want to go to that place. But I tell you, more than any of the other maps and things in that book, people were always saying, well, you left one out. You left out the one that you were involved in. So in the revised and expanded, and I've changed the title now to the Atlas of the Unexplained Bigfoot, that map is in there, and a whole bunch of others. I've actually included maps to go along with each chapter of the story, as opposed to just maps in the appendix. But and the reason I changed the title, I made 3 atlases. The first one was about Bigfoot. The second one was more about UFOs, followed right in the same vein. And then the third one was based upon the Mothman legend, and took viewers to many of the original spots where the Mothman was seen all around West Virginia and Ohio during that era. Unfortunately, a lot of those locations have kind of been lost in the fog of time and memory, for that matter. Well, we were able to track down many of those locations, the GPS coordinates. Well, I titled that book The Atlas of the Unexplained Mothman. So now, to try to make a whole series of it, I'm going back, and now that I've revised the Bigfoot Atlas to maybe snap it into the same continuity as the Mothman. So now I'm working on the UFO one as well. So in the end, there should be a whole series of the Atlas of the Unexplained. But no, to answer in a very roundabout way, no, we do not go camping. I can still get her to go, to go to some crazy places, so-called haunted, hot spots. I don't know how I'm able to convince her to go to some of these places anymore either, because oftentimes she's the one who ends up having some of the weird stuff happen to her. It seems like I'm a deadbeat when it comes to attracting weird stuff to me, but she gets that. So I don't know how. I don't know how I can convince her to go anywhere at this point, but she does. So she married me, so I guess she knew what she was marrying.
Yeah. After that encounter, she probably didn't have any choice.
Yeah, exactly.
Zach, I know you're an English teacher. You're a history buff. You write, and you're really into storytelling. What is your favorite story about Bigfoot?
Well, I tell you what. I tell a lot of stories about Bigfoot at our museum down in Kentucky. I've got a place called the Nightmare Gallery, Paranormal Road Trippers Nightmare Gallery, and I guide every tour of the gallery. And on that tour, I always save the last probably 4th or 3rd of the tour is entirely about Bigfoot, and I'm always drawn. My favorite tales to tell there are the Daniel Boone and the Yahoo. I love talking about that because that's an Appalachian, that's one of the first documented Bigfoot sightings ever by the white man, I guess. I mean, Native American legends, there were certainly Native American tribes that had encountered these creatures. But as far as documentation go, that one, Teddy Roosevelt, the tale that he wrote about himself, about the encounter with the old prospector Bowman, and I mean, that's just a gnarly tale, and so well written too by Roosevelt, and I tell you, that one, I love telling that one. Of course, the old classic Ape Canyon is a wonderful one as well. But all these tales, I find myself telling them at the gallery, or telling them at many of these. Anytime I'm invited to speak at these conferences and things, I like to tell some of these tales because I think people like to hear these stories. That's just it. Some of these things are people don't hear them enough. I feel like, some people like to hear these things. So I like to tell some of the classics of Bigfooting.
Okay. With that being said, do you feel like the historic version of Sasquatch meets today's version of the Sasquatch?
There's a historic version. You mean the one from some of the tales and things through history?
Yeah, from the earlier tales, like from prior to the Patterson Gimlin film, like the Eight Canyon story or the Bowman tale.
Yeah.
Albert Otzman's account.
Yeah, I do. I think all through history, I think there's a remarkable consistency between these tales. What people report today is not unlike things that people were reporting 100 years ago or 200 years ago or 300 years ago. I think the people have changed. The circumstances of these encounters have changed. I think if you'd run into a creature like this in Montana, like Bowman and Roosevelt's tale had done, it might be a little more intimidating than running into a creature in Golden Gate Park in San Francisco, just because of the proximity of people and I think a lot of Bigfoot investigators are packing heat with them too these days. Maybe a little bit more reliable weapons than maybe they would have had in the pioneer days. But I think there's a remarkable consistency between these tales over the last 1,000 years. I mean, what the Native American tribes in California, the Tool River Indian Reservation, they still have that rock art there today, and they've been telling those tales for centuries, and it's I don't think it's changed at all. I think the legend of Bigfoot is alive and well.
Yeah, it is. It is, and it's getting bigger every day.
I agree. There's more events. There's more conferences, more festivals. I feel like interest in all sorts of the unexplained is at an all-time high. You see these things popping up more so. I mean, 5 or 10 years ago, how many Bigfoot conferences were there? How many Bigfoot festivals? I would say there's at least 4 times as many as there were 10 years ago. And there's new ones popping up all the time. There was one in the Red River Gorge here in Kentucky. Very first time they ever did it was back in May. And it was Red River Gorge, Powell County, Kentucky, shut the place down. I mean, the town was just paralyzed because so many people tried to come in. The roads were closed down. They were having church buses trying to bus people into this area because there's so much interest in this. People are excited about Bigfoot for the first time, or not the first time, but for the first time in years. I feel like more people are excited about Bigfoot than it's good. It's again, the legend of Bigfoot is alive and well.
I don't think it's as taboo now as it used to be. People will talk about it more freely now than they would have, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, something like that. People, I can speak for mountain people because, I live right up here in the mountains in Virginia, right on the Kentucky border. And, people around here don't talk about it that much. Right dead in the middle of the Bible Belt, Bigfoot's the devil, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, that kind of leads me into our next question. And this is a really weird question. And I try to ask this question to kind of get into the headspace of our guests. But the question is animal, mineral, or vegetable? And I'll explain it. Animal, do you believe that Bigfoot is a living animal? Mineral, do you think that Bigfoot might be extraterrestrial or interdimensional? Or vegetable, do you feel that Bigfoot might be spiritual? Or do you think it may be a combination of any of those?
I have always ascribed, I say this knowing full well that there are good arguments that can be made for all three. And I've listened to speakers like Ron Moorhead, for example. I think his book, Quantum Bigfoot, is a very interesting take, and one that he makes a compelling case for. I've always been in the flesh and blood animal, just because to me, whatever was outside my tent that night sounded like a flesh and blood animal. And so I'm probably, and I could be wrong. I'll be the first to tell you, I very well could be wrong. There may be something more spiritual about this thing. I think a lot of, again, the Native American tribes, they looked at Bigfoot as a very spiritual thing. And like investigators like Ron Moorhead that I was talking about a few minutes ago, look at it as a very almost extraterrestrial, interdimensional, that sort of. So again, I could be wrong, but and if I am, then I'll be the first to admit it.
Oh yeah, I'm kind of in the same camp. And I base my assumption on that just purely on my own experiences, and that's the only evidence that I have to work with. You know what I'm saying? because
Yeah.
I was actually there when it happened, and everything that I've seen so far does not lead me to believe that it's anything other than either a remnant hominin or remnant hominid. So I think it's either an ape species or it might be a primitive form of early man that's left over. So, I'm kind of in the flesh and blood camp, pretty firm on it. That's about all the questions that I've got. We've got one here from George Garcia. George wants to know, Zach, you said you was an English teacher. Has he told his students about his belief in Bigfoot, and what do they say about it?
I don't know about you, but when I was in high school, one of the earliest things you try to do with all your teachers is figure out what their weak spots are. Because if you can find what they really want to be talking about, you could often get them sidetracked, get them talking about their family or their hobby or whatnot, and then they finally would say, "Okay, guys, close the textbook. We're going to talk about this for the rest of class." I think once it came out to my students that they understand that I'm into the weird stuff, they realize, okay, we can get this guy off track. So they're constantly asking me to tell spooky stories. Just Mr. Bales, let's don't read The Catcher in the Rye or Romeo and Juliet. Why don't you tell us a ghost story or tell us the Bigfoot, the history of Bigfoot in Kentucky. And that is, to be honest, that's one of the reasons I started writing the books that I have, is because so many kids were doing this to me so regularly. I thought, if I write it down, I can tell the kids, why you wanted me to tell you? All you got to do is go read it, and that way I can maybe trick the kids into literacy. And they haven't realized that it's a long con here. That as an English teacher, it's my job to make sure they read something, and it's a trick to try to get these kids to read. But no, yeah, they know I'm interested in all these topics, these strange topics, or what many of them would call strange. But at the same time, I tell you what, a lot of them are believers too. And parents, when they get wind, I get emails all the time. Would you come out to our farm? Would you come out to this? We got a house out in the woods, our cabin we go to on the weekends, and we've had some weird stuff, and we'd like to share our story with somebody. But it's a constant. I love it. I love it. It started as a hobby, and now it's a passion. And like I said, we opened a museum, Paranormal Road Trippers Nightmare Gallery in Somerset, Kentucky, and I guide tours every day. And it gives me something I can talk about these tales and share these legends and share the folklore, and that's kind of what I love to do. My whole philosophy is, if we don't strive to keep our legends alive, our folklore alive, whether it be in Kentucky or Virginia or West Virginia or anywhere, then sooner or later these tales might just fade away or die completely. And to me and my family, and I can tell talking to you that you're just like us as well. That'd be a real shame to see these stories go away. So that's one of the main reasons I'm into Bigfoot and all these topics as well. From a folklore perspective, it's fascinating. It's our history, it's what, and that's the thing about folklore. It brings people together. And this time in the world we live in today, I feel like people look for every which way to try to pull each other apart. And I don't want to be with this person. I don't want to be with this person. I don't want to associate with that person. But folklore is one of those things that unites people. It's a sense of identity. It gives communities and states and regions of the country a sense of identity, something everybody can get behind. I mean, Bigfoot, he's a champion of the common man. I mean, realistically, he's defied science and defied technology and still maintains this. People believe in it. They want to believe, because it makes the world such a more interesting place when you have these kinds of things out there. It makes people want to wonder, a sense of wonder. I don't know. I'm ranting and raving now, though. I'm sorry.
I mean, you're making perfect sense. I think, there is like so many different tales out there. There's so many different names for it. It's an enigma. I mean, it really is. There's thousands and thousands and thousands of stories, and there's probably thousands and thousands of sightings that we'll never hear about. And that's kind of the sad part about it.
Because people think they might be ridiculed, I guess, if they come forward.
Yeah.
They worry about ridicule. And yeah, it's a shame. That's definitely a shame.
It is, but that's a big thing in this community. But anyway, we're getting close to the end of the show here, Zach. I wanted to give you an opportunity to plug your books. You're an author. Go ahead and plug your Road Trippers Gallery. I think that would be pretty awesome. And Zach also has a website he's going to tell us about.
Yeah. I've written 5 books on all things strange, 2 books on ghosts, 1 book on Bigfoot, a book on UFOs, and a book on Mothman. If you go to my website, paranormalroadtripper.net, or you can go to paranormalroadtripper.com. I recently managed to snag that web address as well. You can find information about those books. They're all true stories, things that happened. Most of them are true stories that happened to me. I say most of them are true stories. They're all true stories, but the one things that happened to me. But I've also got some of the legendary cases from the history. Like I can't vouch for some of the UFO sightings and things in the book that I wasn't there to see. I guess I can't vouch for those being real. But I repeated the historic stories. But yeah, all that is available online. We do own a museum in Somerset, Kentucky called Paranormal Road Trippers Nightmare Gallery. We're one of the best reviewed attractions in Kentucky. At this point, with over 600 Google reviews, we have a 5-star rating. We are all about customer satisfaction. I guide all the tours myself. All you have to do to visit is, come to Somerset. The tours are free. All you have to do is go to nightmaregallery.net. There's a link for it on paranormalroadtripper.net. So it allows you to book a tour. You choose the time, you choose the date you'd like to be there. Again, I only have it open on times that I know I can be there to guide the tour, because I guide all the tours. Tours last half an hour, 45 minutes. We have a one-of-a-kind gift shop with all sorts of interesting things in it as well. But we have a lot of fun. We have a lot of fun at the gallery, and we talk all about strange folklore. Again, not just Bigfoot. So if you're into other weird phenomena, paranormal phenomena, that sort of thing, we talk about all those things as well. But yeah, tours are free. I got them all myself. Come to Somerset, Kentucky. We tour to a lot of events and festivals. This coming weekend, my wife and I are going to be in Logan, Ohio at the Hocking Hills Bigfoot Festival. I'm going to be speaking at I think 10:30 a.m. on Friday, this Friday at the festival. 2 weeks later, I'll be at the WNC Bigfoot Festival in Marion, North Carolina. I'll be speaking on the Bigfoot phenomenon, I think at 12:30, noon 30. So you can come see me there. I'm at the Mothman Festival, and we go to all these strange festivals. So yeah, if you'd like to come by and say hello or get one of the books in person, or just get information about the museum in person, we are constantly on the road at different events. We go to 20 or 30 different Bigfoot, UFO, ghost, all sorts of strange events, every year, 20 or 30 every year. And yeah, if you go to our Facebook page or our website, you'll find where you can find us. But we're always somewhere. So yeah.
Excellent. Well, Zach, I really appreciate you being on. This is the first show that I've done by myself, and you're like the first guest that I've ever booked by myself. And brother, I really, really appreciate you coming on. Appreciate everything you did. Just want to let everybody know we're going to have another show next week. It'll be August the 11th, same time. We'll be speaking to Brian Pierce about his encounters. He has over 40 years of encounters that he'd like to talk about. And Zach, if you don't care, could you hang on for a minute after we end the show?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been such a pleasure talking to you tonight. It's great. Keep doing what you're doing. I love to see this kind of passion across the board, and I can tell you're passionate about this topic.
I am. I really am. Zach, I appreciate you. And everybody, good night. Have a good week, and we'll see you all next week.
Sasquatch Watch Radio, the official podcast partner of Big. We've got groundbreaking news that'll shake the very foundations of the cryptid community. Sasquatch Watch Radio is incredibly proud to announce our exclusive podcast partnership with Big, the Bigfoot Investigative Group. For the first time ever, you'll get an inside look into the world of Bigfoot investigations through the eyes of true American heroes. Big is comprised of an elite team of United States Navy SEAL veterans, United States Marine Corps veterans, and United States Army veterans, bringing their unparalleled discipline, strategic thinking, and investigative prowess to the hunt for Sasquatch. Prepare for an auditory adventure like no other. Starting this Monday, tune in at 9 p.m. Eastern Time for thrilling new interviews and occasional updates directly from the Bigfoot Investigative Group. Sasquatch Watch Radio is honored to be the official podcast of Big's Navy SEAL team, and we can't wait to share their incredible work with you. Don't miss out. Monday nights at 9 p.m. ET, only on Sasquatch Watch Radio.